we have some wonderful clips from Moviedrome to look at, but I want to start by asking Nick and Alex, give us a sense of how it came to be. What was it? What were its aims, and how easy was it to get commissioned?
You know the answer to that
Aims. Well, in the late 80s, we'd been doing a curated strand on BBC Two called The Film Club, which my colleague David Thompson, who's here tonight, was producer of. And that was a way of yoking double bills of films together on Saturday night, often foreign language or cultural films, or sometimes American films of a more mainstream nature. And directors or writers or actors would present them and explain why they liked doing those, why they liked those films so much and how they'd been influenced by them. And the BBC had a vast archive of films at this time, thousands of movies sitting in under license. And there were a lot of films there that you couldn't easily place in prime time or afternoons or mornings. They'd end up in late night, sort of unexplained, and sort of disappear. And we began to think about those films and what could we do with those films. And I thought about the cinemas that I'd come to love when I first moved to London, the Paris Pullman, the Academy on Oxford Street, the Rio in Dalston, and the sort of films they showed late night, basically, where you'd go in and see a movie after the pub. You might make it all the way through that film. You might wake up in the second half of the double bill a bit confused. So those films were, it seemed like this is the way we could sort of present something that was different, not as straightforwardly cultural as Film Club, but that delved into other areas.
Yeah.
And
Alex, how did you come to be involved?
Because he offered me the job.
yeah.
I had done one segment of the Film Club, and it was just incredible company because, I mean, Lindsay Anderson, Nick Rowe, Ken Russell, Stephen Frears. I mean, the great and the good of British film were presenting these films, but for some reason, of all the extremely talented and intelligent people that commented on films in that series, Nick asked me to be the presenter of Moviedrome.
I think we have a clip of you introducing The Long Goodbye on that Film Club strand. Is that right? Let's have a look. I mean, it is like an audition tape. There's your natural charm. It's like you're not reading the autocue. I'm guessing that you did have an autocue to guide you.
I don't think we had an autocue until the second season of Moviedrome.
Really?
Yeah, and I think you were
So you were just riffing
That was
from,
just winging
from your,
it, yeah.
It feels wonderful.
But we had an autocue in the second season.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I want to get on to showing some clips from Moviedrome, but before we do, I think we've got a clip to show you what Moviedrome would appear against. Do you want to tell us a bit about the...
I mean, people won't be surprised. The big name in film criticism on the BBC, in fact in Britain at that time, was Barry Norman. And Barry was in a lot of ways, he was a great critic. He was very respected. He's very well known. I'd say he's still possibly, apart from Mark Kermode, the best known film critic, I have to say that obviously, the best known film critic this country's ever produced. And, but his taste was not bad. But there were certain films that he just didn't seem to get, and I thought it'd be interesting to see him review RoboCop, which was a film that came out in 1988, the same year that we started Moviedrome, and you'll see, well, what his attitude was.
Yeah, let's play it. Yeah, it's interesting because his view really held sway. I met someone recently online who said they were still haunted by the fact that Barry Norman said Spice World, the Spice Girls film, was a good film and went to see it on that basis. And this is like, 30 years on from that. So that's what you're reacting against. I mean, what's interesting as well is we haven't shown a proper clip of Moviedrome, but John, you must have been watching some of the earlier things, like that world of late night film on the BBC. What sense did you have of how important these films were in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I was maybe 15, 16 at the time in a small factory town in Scotland, and there was the video shop which had RoboCop, Predator, Die Hard, Terminator, Rambo, and I would just get those same films out week after week because I began to sort of absolutely love them. But there was no internet, there's no other way, television wasn't showing it, and then suddenly Moviedrome came about, and I found Moviedrome, and it was just, it blew my mind, you know. There was one or two particular ones that I might talk about later, or I can mention now that.
We'll mention them, and then when
Yeah, I mean, there was when Assault on Precinct 13 just was the one that I'd never seen anything like it, and I remember watching it. I remember the dialogue he said introducing it, you know, and I remember everything about the introduction and the film, and Electroglide in Blue as well, you know. So films that I immediately went and got the soundtrack to, and then appreciated soundtrack and cinema, and it just opened the world to me.
So at least two questions which for Nick and Alex to answer. One is, how did you decide on that first season of films, and how did you go about writing and researching in the days before the internet? Did you just base it on what you knew, what you saw by watching the film?
Well, there was always information. I mean, there was the wonderful British Film Institute monthly film bulletin, which has now been subsumed into Sight and Sound magazine.
Yeah.
But that was tremendously useful for information about the film, for the credits, for a synopsis, often wrong, and for and for a brief but cogent criticism of the film. And so that was a great asset. And also books in the library. You used to go to the library in those days.
Oh, okay.
You know? So there were lots of ways of finding out information about films.
And that first season of that shortlist, give us a sense of what you tried to put together in each series.
Well, we wanted to start with a film that was gaining a critical, a sort of cult reputation at the time, The Wicker Man, which I'd seen, like a lot of people, on a double bill with Don't Look Now. It was a B feature. It had been heavily cut. It was a very strange film. I remember going in late to the double bill, and suddenly I'm in the middle of a movie with Edward Woodward, who was a sort of TV cop, basically, playing a Christian who'd washed up on an island somewhere trying to find a paganist cult. It was a very, very strange film indeed, with strange dialogue and really odd goings-on. And that film, just at that point in the 80s, was beginning to get some traction. And David, who with whom I worked on Film Club, tracked down a longer version of that film, because there was a lot of talk about, like, bits of it were buried under the M4, you know, or, you know, strange. But David found that there was a longer version in America.
Yeah, because Robin Hardy said that Christian fundamentalists were big champions of the film because they believed it showed you the truth of how the devil was out there in the world.
Interesting.
So that's probably why it's so I did an uncut version there.
Well, we wait. He eventually, David had a call from somebody in the States. We eventually got a hold of it. It was days before transmission. It arrived on 2-inch videotape, strange reel, and we pieced it together with the version we had and made a sort of slight hybrid, really, and a longer version of the film. So we were, in a way, the beginning of that whole cycle that's happened with Wicker Man, where it's now gone through God knows how many iterations, and it's probably coming back to the original cut soon.
Yes.
Some would say for the better, but it's a really strange film. It was the perfect way to kick off. And then after that, there were a lot of movies sitting there, and some were older, some were not so old, but they were just curious for their content or their genre. There was horror, there was sci-fi.
Well, things like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the original, which had been remade, I think, in the late 70s, hadn't it?
Absolutely.
They'd sort of been forgotten or bypassed, hadn't they?
Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
I also wanted to ask about the definition of cult, because we're going to have a look at your introduction to Terminator shortly, where it seems like there was a slight dispute about what should qualify as a cult film, and I wonder how you felt about.
Oh, I mean, I understand why we showed Terminator, because it was a hugely popular film. And when we screened Terminator, because there were only, 3 or 4...
4 channels.
4 channels in those days. And so when we showed Terminator, 20 million people watched it.
Really?
That was a third of the population of the country.
Was that you,
so that
John?
was
Were you one of those?
Oh, yeah.
You were one of them.
Yeah.
And that was incredible, the reach of the broadcaster and the reach of Moviedrome. I mean, I felt a little ambivalent about it, only because it was a big Hollywood success. You know, this wasn't a film that needed a champion by any means.
Yeah. Well, what I love is watching Alex's introduction to this film after you've watched the Barry Norman and seeing how you managed to express your not entire enjoyment of it, but without slagging it off in any moral sense, which I think is the key.
But I think what Barry Norman is doing, in a way, we might not agree with it, but he is bringing a moral perspective to his analysis. And I think that's really important, and maybe that's got lost now. Because now we just tend to celebrate the enormous spending of money that a Hollywood film involves, you know, and the presence of vedettes, you know. But we don't really address the moral issue. And so I would defend Barry Norman in that sense, because I think he was coming from a moral perspective. And that we lack a moral perspective, perhaps, in our relation to the cinema today.
But so along with Terminator, obviously, we had other, many other titles. Sunset Boulevard, for instance, which was both a mainstream Hollywood film, but also a cult classic. And that's a movie that we wanted to show, but it seemed like, what could we say about Sunset Boulevard that hadn't been said before? So Alex came up with a little idea of how we might introduce this movie.
As you will see.
Yeah. And it's fair to say it's not a spoiler, because it's the beginning of the film, isn't it, in a way? Let's have a look anyway. Surely your introduction should have continued in posthumous voiceover at that point.
Glug, glug.
It should actually. We should have put the camera in the swimming pool and had my body floating
But
there and
also,
continue the intro. Yeah.
How many takes? Just the one?
We only did one take,
One
usually,
take.
didn't we? Yeah.
That was
We
a
always
one
did
take.
that.
John,
Perfect.
do you remember some of the intros for their more
Yeah, I mean,
stunt-like nature?
Even Assault on Precinct 13, I remember you saying that, and I haven't seen it since, this is 25, 30 years ago, but you were saying there's only 2 women in this film, and they're both wearing the same sweater. And it really stuck with me, that. And when I watched it, I was like, yes, he's right, they are both wearing the same sweater.
Yeah, we have got that one to show later
but
as well.
after that, it sort of opened a door of sort of looking at films different ways, or criticizing it different ways, and thinking, when I went back and watched some of the films I watched before, I was thinking, where's the women characters, for instance, or what, So it's just a throwaway comment, but it was highlighting the fact that there, where's women in this film, or where's women in that film, character, and so, yeah, little throwaway things it just started meaning a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Alex, thank you for challenging the male gaze, even back more than 30 years ago. We're very grateful.
My pleasure.
Right, well, let's...
But my gaze is a male gaze. I'm a male. I'm gazing around the room now.
You're self-aware, which is good. Let's have a look at your introduction to Terminator, which we can get to sense was a film you didn't really like that much, but you respected in a certain way. Let's have a look. Nick, hold up. Nick's got one of these now rare copies of the Moviedrome book you could send off for. I know some of you brought yours with you. They're really beautifully produced.
Yeah, very nice job, actually, by the BBC. For £2.50 in those days. Incredible.
Fantastic. What a bargain.
So,
I want to say something about those guns, though, because do you remember a film called Dirty Harry?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody see it when it first came out? Do you remember Dirty Harry talking about his gun? When the film first came out, it was a .357 Magnum, the most powerful handgun in the world, and it could blow your head clean off. Do you feel lucky? They went through the film after Colt produced a .400 Magnum, and they revoiced the film so that if you watch that film now, Clint Eastwood is actually doing an ad for a different firearm, an even larger handgun than the .357 Magnum. And I find that very interesting, because I have not been able to find an early edition of Dirty Harry with the reference to the .357 Magnum. And I've never seen anybody point this out, that the studio went back into the film and changed the dialogue to promote the larger bore handgun.
Product placement.
Product placement by Hollywood.
Yeah.
That script was a particularly beautiful example of how much you can condense into a relatively short amount of text and delivery. And there's actually very little judgment given. You're just stating a load of facts, like the cost of a stealth wing fighter and so on. How did you decide what to incorporate? And was there any pushback from the BBC editorially? I'm thinking with my due impartiality head on.
We were very fortunate, because the BBC never, by Moviedrome,
Yeah.
we gave offence on another occasion, but in terms of Moviedrome, I don't think we ever got any objections. There was one occasion when we were going to screen Riot in Cell Block 11. You remember that?
Yeah,
And they pulled it at the last minute and replaced it with something else.
that's right. Because there'd been riots?
No, there was the concern that all the prison population of Britain were waiting for the Moviedrome screening of Riot in Cell Block 11 to kick off riots all over the country. And so they replaced it with another film at the last minute, but there was still one riot that evening when the film didn't take place at Strangeways. You know?
The Strange
So-
Ways riot was
Yes.
the night that you didn't show that
That was the night we
film.
didn't show Riot in Cell Block
Just
11.
imagine what would have happened if you had shown that film.
But interesting, isn't it? And also that just talks about the power of the broadcaster and the power of film and the power of the broadcaster which reached the whole country at a time when there were very few television channels. Very interesting.
Did you ever get any pushback from people like Mary Whitehouse?
I don't remember her.
Because I remember when Last Temptation
Particularly.
of Christ was being screened on the BBC a few years later.
Yeah.
It might have been Channel 4 even, it's sort of early 90s. And there was a huge political row over that and whether it should go ahead or not. But you never had any issues with what you were screening.
I mean, it's interesting because the Wicker Man could have provoked such a response, couldn't it? But somehow the Wicker Man slid by, you know?
Had a good Christian message.
Yeah.
I think we were.
It does actually have a good Christian
It does.
message. It really does. It's
Yeah.
actually, you watch the film tonight.
We were really untroubled by interference. It's very, because I still do work for the BBC. I don't work for the BBC, but I do work for the BBC.
You make
and I do
screenshots.
Screenshot, which is a
On
radio
Radio
show with Mark and Ellen, and we get tremendous scrutiny of the studio conversations and our interviews, and much more interference in the 4 years of Screenshot's life than Moviedrome had in a dozen years. Yeah.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
So having shown that clip of you introducing Terminator with, I think it's fair to say, less enthusiasm than some of your other deliveries, we've got an introduction to 200 Motels, which refers back to the blockbuster issue. Should we have a look at that and then talk about it? You had some fun with that one. What I really noticed about that one was you have references to places like the Scala Cinema, for those who know. The places cinephiles might have gone. But there was information for complete newbies who might stumble across it and never have seen or heard of any of these films or Frank Zappa. That balance of tone is really interesting. Did you have a sense of who your audience were or who you wanted to try and attract?
What do you think?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
While you're thinking about it, I mean, John, when you first stumbled across it, or did you seek out Moviedrome when you first heard about it?
I don't think there was much seeking out on that. I mean, back then, because it was just the TV,
Yeah.
you know, so it was just switch it on and
You'd stumbled across it.
yeah. And then once you've seen it once, you can't wait for it to come on again, you know, and then it becomes regular viewing. So yeah, there's a different way of discovering stuff back then, wasn't it? You just happen upon it.
There was something called the Viewers and Listeners Log, which was a dreaded document that would come out, you know, the day after a film or a program had been screened. And every Monday morning, I would read the Viewers and Listeners Log, and it would be 50-50. Why is that man standing up talking about that film before we see it, spoiling the plot for us? And then there'd be the, I love what he said. So it was a kind of weird split. There were people who really disliked what we were doing, like really disliked it. And then others who, like John, who were into it. So I think it was, but as to who that audience, I mean, I suspect younger people, there was definitely a younger, like a teenage demographic, definitely was there.
I mean, was it what sparked your interest in filmmaking, do you think?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I went on to go to art school, but when I was at art school, I worked in the Cameo Cinema in Edinburgh, and I did the late night double bills. So it sort of, it continued from watching Moviedrome to doing late night double bills, where...
Were you programming them?
No, I was an usher.
Oh.
You know, ripping tickets. I was young, I was at art school, you know. And but we had to sit in one of the double bills, so I saw all these films on the big screen for the first time, you know. And I didn't go to film school, so Moviedrome and then the late night double bills, you know, was my film school.
Yeah, it's funny, you mentioned the viewer log. I once rang up to complain, not about Moviedrome. It was the only time in my life I rang up to complain about something on the BBC. And it was because they had scheduled an inappropriate film too early, and they'd scheduled Clint Eastwood's Bronco Billy at 6 o'clock on BBC Two, which has a big attempted rape scene.
Oh.
And I rang up and I said very nicely, look, I'm not objecting to you showing this film, but shouldn't it be on late at night? You know, and that sort of, obviously someone had not watched it through before just sticking it in to fill holes. I think what really showed about Moviedrome wasn't just that the films might be more adult in content, but you'd thought about what would benefit from that late night cult slot.
Yeah.
And there was a respect for the film as much as for the audience in that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think the longer that Alex was at the helm, as it were, the more we started to think about what he would like
Yes, so talk
to
me
be
through
included.
how,
You know,
how
so I'm
the
thinking
series
of the
developed.
spaghetti westerns,
Well,
for instance.
that was the thing, because although Nick went into this, delved deeply into this pit of films that were under license by the BBC, but they couldn't necessarily find a spot to screen the film. Because Yojimbo, you know, the BBC had Yojimbo under license, but what were they going to do with that? It's a film in Japanese about samurais in CinemaScope. What are they going to do? Are they going to show it on Kurosawa's birthday? I mean, whereas Moviedrome provided a context for a whole bunch of different films.
Did you sequence them so that, you know, the film that was on one week, there would be a logic to what would come next?
No.
Oh.
No, I don't think so. Because
No, we did start to do double bills as time went by, and then those films would be related. There'd be some connection, thematic, genre, or otherwise, between the double bills, in the way that those late night cinema screenings had been. But no, week to week, and also TV schedules would change, and a movie that was going to play third in the run would suddenly be at the end, or you know, you'd be messed around like that. So. No, it wasn't sequenced in that sense. But we definitely, because Alex was very keen on certain, particularly Italian westerns, and there were a lot of westerns that hadn't been seen here.
no,
right?
we licensed 3 westerns that had never been shown officially in the UK before. Django, The Great Silence, which is going to play on Sunday, and Requiescant, which is a marvelous film. If you haven't seen Requiescant, you must see it because it's got some great stuff going on there, including Pier Paolo Pasolini playing a revolutionary priest.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
And Bullet for the General was.
But Bullet for the General had already played in the UK,
Okay.
and they might even have had it under license. Or did
Maybe.
you license it specially?
And I'm struggling to remember. Yeah.
I mean, the other thing is that when, as a filmmaker, you can't set out to make a cult film, can you? You just have
That's
to
right.
let, you know, that is out of your hands completely.
Yeah.
So, in a way, Moviedrome as well, there must have been some films where they maybe weren't cult until Moviedrome showed them.
Yes.
And then now they're called cult films because of you know, so it's sort of interesting that you could take a film that's, I mean, they're all just films, they're not cult films.
Yeah.
Until someone calls them a cult film, so.
In fact,
Yeah.
films that were made, like the Troma pictures, we never screened those because they seemed to set out to make, like, we're going to make a cult film, and that felt all wrong to us, really.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? But it did seem like Troma had a sort of had a model for what they were doing, and
Give
some
us
of
an
those films were very
example of some of
entertaining.
those titles.
Well, Surf Nazis Must Die, for instance.
Toxic Avenger,
Yeah.
Mark III. You know, I mean, Troma. There are some very good Troma films, but I think they were made with that intention.
Yeah, they kind of spotted that niche. But the film that, for instance, of all the Moviedrome pictures, the one I think most about still is a weird film called Carnival of Souls, which turned up. A tape turned up at the BBC of this film, and it was kind of like, where the hell did this come from? I've never heard of it. It wasn't in any of the history books that we could discern. It was made by a man who made educational films in Texas, I think.
That's right.
Called Herc Harvey. He'd only ever made this one movie, and it's really strange. It's kind of got an incident at Owl Creek Bridge kind of feel about it. So it's a story that begins with a road accident, and then what happens after that is related to that. It's black and white. It's very poorly dubbed and scripted, which makes it even stranger. So people say things that non sequiturs or and it's post-dubbed. It's beautifully shot. It's got strange music, and it was just a complete oddity, this movie.
And it just turned up.
It literally, the tape just came in. It was very, very. That's my memory of it. It didn't come in a package. It just some sales agent just sent it in.
Yeah. And none of us knew anything about it. Not
A
Nick,
bit
not
like
me.
exactly.
It sounds a bit like Videodrome, I was just saying.
It's a very odd film.
Right, let's go on to, which I think John Maclean's standout from Moviedrome, which is Assault on Precinct 13. Let's have a look at the intro and then talk about it. I love that sense of then going just straight into the film. Tell us about the locations that you shot some of these intros
Where were
at.
we? Do you remember where that was?
That was, let's think about, I think that might have been,
In Tucson? Somewhere?
no, it's
Some
not, it's a
industrial-
city. It's either, it might be New York, or it might be Los Angeles. No, it doesn't look
No, we
like
never
LA.
shot in Los Angeles.
You had a
did we?
BBC budget to go and film the intros.
Yeah. Basically, we did the first season. We did in a studio with a full set, which you saw in the opening clip. Very lovely set, designed by a guy called Jeff Powell, no longer with us. He was a talented set designer.
Yeah.
And he worked with Bob Cummins, who's here tonight. He's the marvelous graphic designer who became a kind of production designer for the series throughout. And so we did one season in TV Centre, and then Alex, you were living in Tucson, I think.
Yes.
So we went out to Tucson and we filmed there in all sorts of wonderful places. A Titan missile silo, I remember.
Yeah.
Stand out, and lots of saguaro cactus everywhere. We were up on a observatory in Kits Peak. It was
yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
And that's where Sunset Boulevard was filmed, because you were living in that motel, where
motel.
we filmed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that pool was his pool. And then after that, we went to a lot of American cities. We did San Francisco, New York. I think we
Oh, I
did do
forgot
a
about San
season.
Francisco.
I think
I
we did
forgot
do a
about San
season in
Francisco.
LA. I thought.
Maybe we did.
Yeah. And then we were in Spain one year when you were living there.
Almeria. Yeah.
So we did a lot of Western locations down in Almeria and thereabouts. We were in Hungary once, Budapest. Seemed like a good idea. We did a lot of traveling, and but a very small crew, obviously.
And we'll see some of the effect of the film you did. So, John, what memories did watching that intro to Assault on Precinct 13 bring back?
I mean, not seeing it must be 30 years or however long, and not seeing it, but just I'm glad I remembered it so well. Yes, actually.
Yeah.
But just the intros and then just the films, really. I mean, Assault on Precinct 13 just particularly hit something for me, and it was the music, and it was the sort of. I'd watched the westerns with my dad, and I watched Rio Bravo, but there was something about this sort of contemporariness of that film that just of the paper, the guns and the paper sort of flapping up, and I mean, I've watched it a million times since, but yeah.
And we really wanted to show films that had merit. We never showed a film that we thought was diabolically bad. Just like Plan 9 from Outer Space or something, just so the audience would laugh at it.
Yeah.
We always thought that we were showing a film that we were pleased to show.
Yeah.
But you've raised something else there, which is already cult, which is how you define what is cult. And around this period, I think from the late 80s into the 90s, I felt like the idea of cultness kind of went mainstream in a way, and you had a lot more programs. You had people like Jonathan Ross championing things like comics and some of those Russ Meyer films. And the whole conversation became a sort of louder one. I don't know how you felt about what happened to the definition of cult over the run of Moviedrome.
Oh, I don't think it really matters. I mean, it's just a descriptive word, and for us it was just an excuse to put all these films in a big basket, and show them. I mean, it can only be the result, because when you were saying about some of the Troma films, if you set out to make a cult movie, you really can't, because it's the result. It's like you can't walk out the front door today and decide to be cool. You're going to walk out and you're either cool or you're not, and that was the Moviedrome way as well. The film was either it fit the bill or it didn't.
Were there any films that you ran that you had any regrets about, or was it always you really knew why they earned their place?
I don't know. I think all the films that we showed had merit,
Yeah. I think
yeah.
if we were doing it now, the selection would be very different, because there are very possibly one or only two movies directed by women in the entire run, which is shocking. But it's a long time ago, and there were many fewer female directors. There were female directors, and maybe we should have included Catherine Bigelow or Penelope
Maya Deren.
Spheeris or Maya Deren, exactly.
Yeah.
But we didn't. There were, I think we were in diverse terms. There was, that was again, it was a product of its time, really, the selection. But we did feature Spike Lee movies, and we featured a great filmmaker you love, Charles Burnett, who
Well, yeah,
you
we showed
really...
Charles Burnett film, and we showed, although it was directed by a white guy, but we also showed the Jimmy Cliff movie, which was fantastic. The Harder They Come.
Harder They Come was definitely right in the...
And I don't think it matters what the color of the skin of the director or the sex of the director is, really. It's their intention, and it's what you see on the screen. And what you see on the screen with The Harder They Come is a fantastic story. A fantastic story, brilliantly acted, and really it seems an authentic picture of that life in Jamaica at that time.
Yeah.
And so even if the director was a white guy, it doesn't matter. The film is what matters.
And sometimes, like Robert Aldrich, who is statistically the most highly represented director in Moviedrome across the years, with 7 or 8 pictures, who was, what did you call him, a tough guy director? You know, that was his reputation. He was a kind of man who made The Dirty Dozen, or those kinds of movies. But
And Kiss Me Deadly.
And Kiss Me Deadly. But he made 2 of the movies that we showed with the most fantastic roles for women. Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and The California Dolls, which is a part of the season coming up, and which is a much rarer, his last movie. So even with a director like that, unexpected things, were revealed by choosing their films, I think.
We've talked a little bit about the title sequences, which are so beloved, I think, by anyone who remembers watching Moviedrome. They were designed by Bob Cummins, who I think, is he here?
Bob is here, and also Mark Pringle, who wrote the music.
Who scored the music. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for making these. Let's have a look, and then let's talk a bit about them. They're beautiful. Where did you shoot The Third Man? You didn't fly out to Vienna.
That was in Budapest.
That was in Budapest.
Yeah, and a lot of the running shots of me, I remember being completely puffed out, and Alex was there to do his close-up, obviously, for the Harry Lime moment. Yeah.
Well, you absolutely threw yourself into it. There was never a moment where you thought, "I'm not doing that."
But I'm an actor. I'm an actor. No, it's whatever the director says is what you do, right? Right?
Oh, yeah.
As actors, we do what the director tells us.
Well, Bob very much drove the bus on this, and when we did the King Kong sequence, most of that was filmed in London. A Bush House is the exterior for the, as it were, the Empire State Building, and then we cut together some clips from the movie. Well, Bob cut clips from the movie in there, and then Alex was in New York at that point. We were shooting in New York, so Bob, I hope he doesn't mind me telling this story for him. Bob went through customs at Heathrow with a reproduction of the top of the Empire State Building in a bag, which they made him open. And in another bag, he had, well, they said, "What's that?" And he said, "It's the Empire State Building." And I'm doing the sequence. And they said, "I suppose King Kong's in the other bag." And he pulled out the head of King Kong. And then there were a lot of photographs taken by these customs guys, which then Alex very gamely put on when we got to the studio in New York, so yeah.
What were some of the other sequences? Can you remember that you shot?
We did.
Your favourites? Can you remember any of the others, John?
No.
They were all good. I mean, all of those opening sequences were beautifully designed, and it really was a collaboration between Nick and Bob, because
we had a train sequence.
It was a train sequence as well.
You were you were a kind of Cary Grant type figure, and then you were also shaking cocktails in the restaurant car. We had a whole drive-in sequence with using your, I think it was
Chevy.
your Chevy. So they're all very sort of pastiche homage to a particular kind of film culture, I guess.
And over the years, what sense did you get from BBC executives about how they felt about the series? Did they just
Money
have to
being
recommission
spent.
it?
It was...
They never offered feedback or gave you more money?
No, well, we'll come to one example of feedback later, but we were mostly just encouraged. And the guy, I want to give him a shout out. He was, for some people, he was a very annoying person, but I thought he was great. Alan Yentop, who passed away a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I agree.
He had his faults, but Alan was a brilliant controller of BBC Two, and he was in the seat when this all started, and he was a great supporter of film, cinema, as he would never let you forget. He was friends with Mel Brooks, and he was on David Bowie's yacht, and he was flying across the Atlantic with the Rolling Stones, etc., etc. But he was a brilliant supporter, and he enabled a lot of what was going on at the time, really, of those years, and particularly this kind of work.
Yeah. And Alex, of course, you were still working as a director around all of this. So what's the trajectory at the point when you stop presenting, and there's a bit of a hiatus, isn't there, before Moviedrome comes back with another presenter?
Well, I think we both felt over time, although there was never any interference with what we were doing. We were enormously well supported by the corporation, but I felt a little bit like we were missing foreign language films. It felt like over the duration of my part of Moviedrome, there was a bit of resistance to us showing foreign languages. And I think that showing foreign languages is incredibly important, you know, and exposing people to foreign languages and making them read subtitles is really important. And and I also felt, in a way, that having done Moviedrome for several years, you know, I needed to go back to my day job, you know, and concentrate on that, because I didn't really aspire to be a television presenter or a film critic, you know. And so it was, even though I missed working with Nick, and I missed the fun of it all, but I thought it was important for me just to get back and concentrate on the day job.
Yeah. So Mark Cousins took over, who of course was also a wonderful presenter. Tell us a bit about how he came to join the programme, and let's have a look at him in action.
Alex is, you know, these were big boots to fill, I think. We were very conscious of that. So when the series stopped, I don't think we, there we are, I don't think we didn't think immediately of doing it with anyone else, basically. It was like, well, who would that be? Who could that be? Because this man had a very unique, you know, very unique pedigree, I'd say. He was a film director, he was British, he had incredible film knowledge, great taste.
Oh, thank you very much.
And a very good, you know, a natural broadcaster, really, which is a rare combination of things. We were working with the Edinburgh Film Festival at that time, the BBC, the acquisitions group, and we were sponsoring things there. And this artistic director of the festival I came to know him, Mark Cousins, who was a wonderful guy, had this incredible passion for film. Very, very different style to Alex. And it seemed like, well, let's not go to Peter Jackson, who was one of the names that we thought about, for instance, a working director who had the necessary film knowledge. Let's go to Mark, who was a filmmaker, but of documentaries, but had this incredible knowledge and spoke about film in a very different way, but also was interested in the kinds of films that we wanted to show, basically. So we approached him, and he said, yes.
Let's have a look at this. Is it the first title sequence?
This is a trailer made by BBC Two for the first season with Mark, basically. So it's a 45-second cell, really.
Fantastic. Let's have a look. We're definitely in the age of train spotting by the time this one is made, are we not?
Yeah, you can see that. You can see that in the style of the trailer. And Mark was very different. It was a different matter with him, really, altogether. Although the films were not dissimilar. In the first season, we had Scarface, we had Exotica, we had a lot of films that I could imagine Alex talking about, you know. But Mark did a different job on that, and I think it was a good thing that we changed, really. At that point, we didn't try and reproduce something, you know.
Yeah. I actually, seeing Mark and the difference in his style, I thought what you both have in common is, of course, that sincerity about film and that passion, which isn't condescending, nor is it kind of overly blokey. It's sort of just sincere and knowledgeable, but wears the knowledge lightly. But it was something I was saying to Nick before, watching some of the introductions back, particularly yours, Alex, I thought of, it was like an alternative version of the Open University programs used to stumble across, where you thought, who is this person? What are they wearing? And what are they telling me about? And of course, it works really wonderfully because there is something of the Open University of Cinema, isn't there, about Moviedrome? Would that be fair?
It's the nicest thing you could possibly say.
But also, talking about the outfits, you said you've got one of those jackets, the one that we saw you wearing in Arizona. I mean, was it...
That black jacket I've still got. Yeah.
Were you conscious of the look? Did you get fan mail about the look?
No.
Leather jackets. No. What do you remember, John, about that? Did you watch it right the way through when Mark took over?
I did, yeah. Maybe less so because I was sort of probably already working in cinemas and stuff by then. and discovering stuff. So it was, I really remember the earlier stuff because it was really hometown and still being with the parents and still like having to sometimes maybe even sneak downstairs and watch stuff or something, you know, like real mum and dad don't know me, I'm watching this sort of thing, you know. So very much more memorable the earlier.
Was there a difference in the audience by this point, by the late 90s?
Well, I think there was more competition because Sky was, you know, beginning to develop their movie channels. Channel 4 was, you know, the reason I stopped doing Moviedrome is I went to the Film 4 channel to start the Film 4 channel, Channel 4. So, and that was kind of like Moviedrome 24/7, really,
Yeah.
Film 4 at that point. Not anymore, but it was then. And so the landscape was changing. I think the other thing I think about Mark and Alex is they weren't snobs about high culture and low culture, and I think that's really at the heart of the project here. Films could be, you could call them trash, you could call them whatever, but it wasn't all about, oh, this is wonderful film culture and this is rubbish. You know, everything was treated with a kind of, I think, very level approach, and that's still important to me now, really.
And I think that was something that was starting to filter through society more widely, wasn't it? I mean, you had things like the New Review, which Julie Birchall was involved in, which was definitely treating so-called so-called low culture as just culture that was all to be celebrated.
I think also a generational thing, because Mark and I were really flexible. You know, we could find good in a lot of different things. And I remember when Nick and I were making a documentary about Kurosawa for Channel 4, and we wanted to interview, you know, major film directors about Kurosawa's work. And so we interviewed Francis Coppola and Paul Verhoeven and John Woo and Mike Hodges. And I got the phone number of Ken Russell and called him up and said, wouldn't you like to talk about Kurosawa and your feelings about his work? And he goes, not at all. I have nothing interesting to say about Kurosawa. Why don't you make a documentary about Cocteau? And I said, well, I'd love to make a documentary about Cocteau, but that's not the brief, you know. And I think the thing was that both Mark and I could fit the brief, whereas some other people, perhaps, no disrespect to Ken, who was one of the greatest British filmmakers of all time, but maybe he wouldn't have been as good of a presenter for Moviedrome.
Yeah.
Fair enough. We've got a clip of Mark Cousins introducing a film. This is Exotica, and it gives a sense of his approach and his style. Should we have a look at that?
Yeah, absolutely.
That is a cracking intro when he says he hates it.
That was something that we agreed very early on, Alex and I and Mark, was that you didn't have to like the film. You didn't have to say you liked the film, right? And that was important.
But you'll find some virtue in it.
Exactly.
Yeah. God, I haven't seen that film yet. I'm not sure I will bother now. Right, we've got another clip. Now, this has got an interesting story to it. So, the Parallax View, which is widely regarded as a great conspiracy thriller film, was shown as a sort of special Moviedrome thing. Tell us about this.
It was the 30th anniversary of the Kennedy assassination. So it was in 1993, November. There was a night of programs called Kennedy Night, and the BBC had commissioned several new documentaries or co-produced them. And they asked us, Alex had actually already presented Parallax View in the very first season of Moviedrome, all those years before. But they asked us for a special screening of the film. We agreed, Alex agreed, and he wrote a 12-minute introduction to the film, which, well, we're only going to see a portion of it, but I urge you to look at it on YouTube. It's fascinating. It's full of detail, extraordinary detail about the Kennedy assassination. And
You've written a book.
To coincide with the 50th anniversary of the
Yes.
Kennedy assassination, I wrote a book called The President and the Provocateur, which is the parallel lives of John F. Kennedy and Lee Harvey Oswald, who are very different individuals, but their lives intersect in quite interesting ways. And yes, so I've always been interested in this. And what took place?
well, what happened was the night happened. There were two documentaries that said categorically it was a lone gunman. It was Harvey Oswald. There was no conspiracy whatsoever. And then we came on at the end of the night with a 12-minute explanation of why there was a gigantic conspiracy, or possibly set of conspiracies, all beautifully explained by Alex. And that went out, and then the movie. And the next day, my phone rang when I got to the office, and it was a very, very angry head of Time Watch, which was the BBC unit that had made these documentaries, who screamed at me down the phone, how very dare we go against the rest of the BBC. So I explained that this was an opinion piece by an eminent filmmaker, and it was very well researched. Anyway, I think he slammed the phone down on me eventually, but that was the closest we ever came to a kind of interference, I would say. Thank God they didn't see the intro before it went out.
I was just thinking that would never happen now. Did you happen to have watched this one, John?
No, I didn't.
But I think it's an interesting note, because as Nick says, if somebody engages with you and they start shouting at you, they're on very shaky ground, and they know it. The Time Watch guy, you know, he's paid to sit in that office and make documentaries that reflect the official mainstream political media view of things. So, of course, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, JFK, RFK, Paul Wellstone were all killed by lone assassins, or their plane fell out of the sky. But there is an alternative view of things, which suggests that perhaps, after all, a conspiracy is only an agreement by two or more people to commit a crime. Conspiracies take place all the time. And I think we were very fortunate that we managed to slip that past them. And the fact that the guy called up the next morning raging at Nick only shows what shaky ground he was standing on.
I'm not sure about that.
Absolutely.
So this is a short extract, but it gives you the flavour. Let's have a look.
I have to apologize, because trying to sound so erudite and so knowledgeable, and I mispronounced the journalist's name. She was Dorothy Kilgallen, not Dorothy Killigan, so I apologize for that.
I thought you were going to say, I've changed my mind.
Yes, it was a lone gun.
I mean, it was interesting, because the Dick Russell book was very interesting, but I don't think ultimately the idea of this multifaceted spiderweb conspiracy that goes over the world, all over the world, is really believable. I mean, I think a conspiracy is much more specific. And I think if you look at the people who were in charge of the Secret Service detail that day, and the people who were in charge of the autopsy, when the Secret Service seized Kennedy's body, took it to Washington, D.C., and essentially some Pentagon guys showed up, one of them smoking a big cigar, and they decided what had gone on. I think you can see pretty clearly the outlines of a conspiracy, but it's a much more narrow and focused on Alan Dulles and on the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I don't think it needs to go any further.
We are going to talk about your new film in a moment, but I thought it's quite important to talk a bit about, perhaps, is there one that got away? Is there a film that you would have liked to have put into?
I think we should have shown more musicals, shouldn't we? We should have shown Rocky Horror. We should have shown Spinal Tap, but presumably they were under license to somebody else.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think the one for you was the Mattei Affair, really,
that's right.
Which is a brilliant Italian movie that we even recorded an intro to.
For, yeah.
And then we couldn't get the rights to the film. I believe that's why we couldn't get the rights.
The Mattei Affair is a film about Enrico Mattei, and this was interesting because when I was teaching film, I would say to the students that I was teaching, can you imagine a more boring subject than the guy who revitalized the petrochemical industry in Italy after the Second World War? You know? But that's the story of the Mattei Affair, and it's directed by Francesco Rossi, perhaps the best director ever, and it stars Gian Maria Volonte, who we know very well from Italian westerns. It's a wonderful film, but as you say, it's a film that is owned by Paramount, and Paramount are unwilling to release the rights to anybody. So you can't see it streaming, you can't buy a DVD or a Blu-ray disc. But
not even on a torrent site.
Yeah.
No.
Well, maybe you can find it if you look hard enough.
Maybe.
But any film by Francesco Rossi is worth watching.
John, when you started making films, were you consciously drawing on memories of things that you'd watched, or was it more it just went in and got absorbed into
Of course you always are, you know, and you know, my Slow West is a western with a shootout, which is Assault on Precinct 13, and Tornado is a samurai film with that's very influenced by Kurosawa and watching Yojimbo, But even films like Electric Light and Blue, which blew me away at the time, they all just seep in, absolutely. You know.
And Alex, for you, when you went back to filmmaking after doing all those years of Moviedrome, had it changed, rewatching some of those films, had it changed how you approached your own films?
Well, it's funny enough that you mentioned Electric Light in Blue, because the first film I made after Walker, I didn't work for a long time, but when I made another film, it was a movie about the Mexican Highway Patrol, funded by a Japanese company called El Patrullero.
Fantastic film.
It's a good film, and Mark Cousins screened it on
it's a fantastic
Moviedrome.
movie.
And I do think that since I had seen Electric Light in Blue when it first came out, it's a film about motorcycle cops in Monument Valley. No, there aren't any motorcycle cops in Monument Valley, but it doesn't matter because it's just a good American cop road movie. And I think that definitely some of those transitions and the cars driving through the desert and stuff, I definitely had been influenced by revisiting Electric Light in Blue for Moviedrome, for sure. Yeah.
Go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to say, in John's film, which is terrific, Tornado, if you haven't seen it, see it, because it's
playing now, right?
It's absolutely a film that would have been in Moviedrome, 100%, because it's fascinating, I think.
I'll take that, and I'm not going to argue.
Let's talk about your forthcoming film, why don't you tell us a bit about it, and then we'll have a look at a clip of it.
I'm currently making a film. The last 3 films I've made have all been Kickstarters, which obviously means that they're very low budgeted, but also gives the director an awful lot of autonomy. So I'm currently working on an adaptation of Dead Souls by Nikolai Gogol as a Western, shot partially in Spain and partially in Arizona. We shot it at the end of last year. We are almost done. It'll probably be finished in the middle of August. Some of the backers are here tonight, and I want to thank you very much if you back the film. I'm very grateful to you. And don't worry, we will get you those DVDs, Blu-rays, the stream, the posters. Everything will be out before Christmas. But we have to try and get it into some festivals first. So we've submitted it to several festivals, and I hope that one of them will provide us with a premiere.
I'm very proud to have a non-speaking role in the film. My name is on a cross in the cemetery where the movie begins.
Yes. Yes. And this was the idea of the Spanish co-producer, because he had directed the film Sad Hill, which is all about restoring Sergio Leone's Good, the Bad, and the Ugly cemetery, which they did by selling Christopher Frayling's name is on one of those crosses. And so he suggested that we should sell names in the cemetery for our film too. And it was a very effective backers rule.
Proud to be there.
Let's have a look at a short clip of Dead Souls.
But what kind of deal? You have to see the film to find out.
How easy is it directing yourself?
By now, it's pretty easy. I mean, yeah. And also, you save on a hotel room, too. I originally asked an actor called Gianni Garco to play this character. Gianni Garco was a star of Italian Westerns and is in terribly good shape. Fantastically active man. But he's 90 years old. And I'm only 70, so I thought it was better to have a young guy play those characters.
Young pretender.
And the only other thing that really struck me, particularly having been talking about your films as well, John, is why the Western, which felt like it had gone out of fashion, has kind of come back, hasn't it? And it's really embraced by a younger generation who didn't grow up with cowboy culture on television or in popular entertainment. What's the key to that?
I mean, Westerns are a great sort of way to sort of explore contemporary, what's happening now. So when you have the 50s Westerns, you've got the McCarthy. When you have the 60s, you've got Vietnam. When you have 70s, you've got sort of hippie ideal, and the 80s, you've got Young Guns, and so each time a Western's made, it's a Western, but it's also now, I think. And so you can say a lot, I mean, and it's fun as well. With guns and
I always
horses.
think Westerns are like a sonnet. It's a form with lots of rules, but it's what you can do within those conventions and what you can do to break them.
I think it's also a genre that works on low budget, and doesn't work on high budget sometimes as well. Like the higher the budget, the worse the Western.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Because the desert is always the same.
Yeah.
And the landscape is always the same. And the Western town is always the same, whether you have $100 million or $100,000. It's the same place.
We couldn't end without talking about what's happened to the place of something like Moviedrome. You know, we talked about how it emerged in this era where there were only 4 channels.
Yeah.
Video, I mean, I was talking to someone earlier today about how it emerges just after the whole moral panic around video nasties, and you start to get classification of home videos. And broadcasting into your individual TV set where you might be watching alone at home. How has streaming changed things? Where could the spirit of Moviedrome reside today, do you think?
What do you think? Well, I'm going to shamelessly plug the BFI player at this point because, no, genuinely, partly because I do work for them, but I think that the selection of movies on there is very good. It changes a lot, and there are introductions, not dissimilar to Moviedrome by Mark Kermode. Not quite the same spirit, but in the same vein. And I think Mubi does some interesting stuff in terms of the way they curate what they show. I think the other streamers, it's a kind of Wild West out there, no pun intended. You know, it's a mess. Everything is there and yet nothing, you know.
Well, I was reading, I think it was an interview you did last year, Alex, where you talked about how in the early days of streaming, it was like they were picking up all these independent films that might have been made and were waiting distribution. But now they're making their own content, and actually independent filmmakers are being squeezed out again. Is that your experience, both Alex and John?
I mean, I just think that's the nature of the game because, I mean, even though the studios, you know, are paragons of evil, but at least they made films. But in the last 15 years or so, we've seen Apple and Netflix and Amazon get into the business. None of them are filmmakers. None of them know how to make films. And they hired the children of Hollywood studio executives to be their CEO. And so I think the quality of the work that's been produced by the streamers is, with some exceptions, is not very high. And I also think the streamers are very selective, and they tend to prioritize films made in the 80s in color and later than the 80s in English. And there's a whole world cinema, a whole black and white cinema, a whole historic cinema, which we kind of celebrated in the early days of Moviedrome, which the streamers just aren't interested in.
Although I suppose with the rise of Nordic noir, there's a lot of subtitled international. I mean, Squid Game. This is world screenmaking, isn't it? Sorry, John, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just think sometimes the history is not there, you know, and I do a bit of teaching as well, and getting younger generation to watch older films it seems more difficult than it should be to me. I don't know.
In Finland, apparently, they learn to speak English by reading subtitles on television because they don't go to school until they're 6. Random fact. Tell me a favourite pick then. Let's end with a favourite thing that you screened on Moviedrome that is a real special one for you.
Ooh. They're all good. They're all good films. They all have merit, you know? They really do. I mean, I don't think I could pick a favourite one because there were so many good films. You know, and each one had its own merit, you know, and that's why I always defer to Nick, because he was the genius who went into that bin and came out with these gems, you know.
I mean,
What did you pick?
I already picked Carnival of Souls for me is the one, but there's a film we're screening next week called Les Diaboliques, which I really recommend.
Yes.
Did it have a bad remake?
It was remade with Sharon Stone, yeah.
Maybe it wasn't a bad remake.
Very poorly, I'd say, really. But the original, which is by Henri-Georges Clouzot, who made one of the greatest of all movies, The Wages of Fear, about men driving trucks of nitroglycerin across mountainous roads. But this film it's kind of the template for a lot of modern horror, but with infinitely more deftness and genuine terror. It scared the bejesus out of me when I first saw it.
Well, I would pick Johnny Guitar, which is so wild. I introduced it once at the BFI. And every time you watch it, there's more and more to just marvel at, isn't there?
Yeah.
What about for you, John? I think I know the answer.
Funny enough, in Tornado, there's a character called Crawford after Johnny Guitar, so after that character in Johnny Guitar, which was the reference. So yeah, I'll go for that.
We'll go for that too. Excellent. John Maclean, Nick Jones, Alex Cox, thank you all so much.
Thank you.